Hello there. Welcome back to the R.M.Williams Outback podcast, where we shine a light on all the absolutely fantastic things that are happening and the fantastic people away from the bright lights of our cities. We focus on the 3 R's of Australia. That's remote, rural and regional. We're just like the beautiful R.M. Williams Outback magazine, except for your ears. I'm Terry Cowley, one of the journalists on the magazine and also your podcast host. Settle in with us and you'll get to meet some really great people, and I don't mean me. Have a question? Find out more at outbackmag.com.au. Charity Little Wings connects children and families with life-saving healthcare services. It conducts up to 70 missions each week, including transporting specialist healthcare providers across New South Wales and Queensland, as well as supporting children living with illness and their families, including free flights, to access medical treatment. The CEO of Little Wings is Clare Pearson, who joins me now to talk about this amazing organisation. Hello, Claire.
Hi, Terry.
Perhaps if we could start with some statistics, Claire. In New South Wales alone, there are 500,000 children who live outside major cities, and these children have consistently poorer health and developmental outcomes relative to their urban counterparts. Why is this so?
Well, if you think about where they live in geographical location to hospital care, often this is quite a far distance, and so it has an impact and makes it difficult for families to access this, whether it be transport, exhausted leave at work, or maybe they're casual workers. And on top of that, I think we've had poor health literacy intergenerationally. So when we go back many generations, a lot of those families didn't access healthcare for those reasons, and so therefore children aren't accessing them. But when we also look at regional hospitals, which might be the hub in which they're referred into, most of those hubs and those hospitals have closed their books to new referrals because they don't have the specialists available. So we're seeing mounting waiting lists in regional locations, but in truth, a lot of those waiting lists have been sitting there for many years and referrals have stopped because there's nowhere to refer them to.
So there's a feeling that rural and regional children have been disadvantaged for far too long. In our story in the current issue of Outback, Midwife and Nurses Association member Nikki Callan from Warren, New South Wales, says her job is to assess, identify and refer patients, but that there was no local paediatrician accepting referrals. She found out about Little Wings by chance and has since formed a partnership between your organisation and her community.
Absolutely. So I met Nikki about 2 years ago now, and we worked for 14 months on identifying a suitable paediatrician, and we've now been delivering those clinics on a monthly basis throughout 2025, addressing some of the needs across Warren and getting great outcomes. When we look at Warren as a community, they had 48 children on the waiting list, which we now know to be a much larger number because as the paediatricians available, we're seeing those referrals come in. But if we look at even the kindergarten intake for 2025, 12 of the 22 children had developmental concerns that hadn't been addressed. And this has knock-on effects for not only health and development and education, but then across the lifeline and, the longevity and health outcomes and just different social outcomes as well in terms of our behaviour and our ability to reach our full potential. So we're very grateful we met Nikki, very proud to be delivering these clinics, flying Dr. Mary out every month.
Is there an opportunity to replicate this model across other areas of Australia?
Absolutely. So Little Wings has actually been developing and delivering this program for 5 years. For us, it was born out of COVID. We had to flip our model. Traditionally, Little Wings flies individual families from the bush into the city for treatment, completely free and unlimited. So some children fly for 18 months, some children fly for 10 years. But during COVID, we obviously couldn't do that with all the lockdowns. And so we flipped the model on its head and started flying the doctors out to regional locations that had the ability to support these children, keeping in mind the social distancing and all those sort of restrictions that were in place. Seems like another world now. And we just thought it was going to run for 12 months. We didn't even give it a second thought. We got a little bit of seed funding. We just hit the ground running, delivered the program. But as we started doing it, we really started to understand how great the divide was and how large the inequity and gap was for healthcare and for regional kids. And so we made a commitment to continue delivering these clinics. We're delivering up to 170 clinics a year across regional New South Wales and around the same in Queensland. We see this model working and we believe it is a viable solution. Ideally, we'd like to see hospitals in regions, we'd like to see the specialists there, but if that's not going to be available or we need time to get those solutions up and running, we need to have something in the meantime. And Little Wings is that option.
So you mentioned funding. Is that really challenging? Because it must cost a lot.
It does. So every mission costs us $1,500, whether we're taking a team of doctors out to do a clinic or we're bringing an individual family in, it all costs us $1,500. We're very lucky that we are a 90% volunteer-led organisation, so 100% of our pilots and 100% of our drivers are in fact volunteers. So we're very lucky in that space. That helps us reduce our costs. But at the end of the day, we have to fuel the planes and we have to maintain them so that everyone is safe on every journey. And you're just in a fight. I classify myself as a professional beggar. Like, that's all I do. I look at safety, I hear the stories of the families, and I feel it's my job to advocate and to fundraise and to make sure that that service is available consistently and equitably across, the regions, to make sure that families aren't missing out. We know that it's hard to ask for help, but we know it's even harder if you put your hand up and ask for help and they say no. So we need to make sure we're always fundraising to have that little bit of fat in the bank. So when someone puts their hand up and says, I need you, we can say, we're there, we got you. And so you're always trying to be 2 steps ahead. And it's exhausting. All charities have this sort of fatigue. They're trying to work so hard, believe so deeply in their mission. But at the end of the day, the work has to be done. We can't have kids in the bush missing out on healthcare and having these detrimental impacts across every domain of their life.
So presumably you get quite a bit of government funding and philanthropic contributions.
Little Wings does receive some government funding. It's not recurring funding, and it's about 5% of our total expense is government funding. And the rest we have to hustle, which is why I call myself a professional beggar. But we have incredibly generous people. We have sponsors that help us. We have people in the community. We apply for grants. We do events. We really do whatever it takes, and I'm so grateful for every dollar. For us, sometimes people think, if I can't give a lot, what's the point? But the reality is it means a lot to us. We collect cans. We're happy for 10 cents because when we all do it en masse, it does add up and it has an impact.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those causes that would pass the pub test. Taking kids living with illness to the medical services they need, I'd imagine some people would find it quite hard to refuse that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when people really, if they listen and they understand what we're doing, they get it pretty instinctually. And I find there's some sort of touch point for everyone. Either you've got kids, you've had a sick child, you've been sick, or you're from the bush and you know those barriers that exist. And so it's a very relatable mission that we're delivering.
And obviously the issue is not just the time it takes to transport. We're talking about the service where you're taking kids to hospitals and medical services rather than your clinics. The issue is not just the time it takes, obviously, to transport them, but the financial and emotional strain.
That's exactly right. If you think about yourself, you might drive to Queensland or drive to Coffs Harbour and you think, it was a long drive, but it's fine, it's doable. But if you have to do it every week, Monday morning you drive down, you do 2 days of medical treatment, then you drive back, and you don't know how long you're going to have to do that for. But the travel fatigue, the mental fatigue that comes with that, the financial pressures, and also to the impact on the whole family unit. As much as we're supporting the individual child, it's the whole family and their ripple effect into the community. We know that when families are using our service, that healthy siblings are much more stable. They have better attendance at school, better engagement, extracurricular activities are more consistent. That routine has less disturbance. Mum and dad are still functioning. They're not as tired or disconnected. So it's really about keeping them all together. And sometimes this is bringing the child and the parent back and forth, but sometimes the child can't leave the hospital. So it's about compassionate flights, bringing healthy siblings and dad usually, but other parent in. Sometimes bring them in on the weekend because we want to keep families strong. We know that when families are strong, communities are stronger, and little people have the best opportunity to reach their full potential.
Yeah, keeping kids in their own communities, it's been shown time and time again that people, not just children, recover better at home or at least near home. That's a no-brainer, isn't it?
It's absolutely true. Just the familiarity, pets, that safe place to land, it's so important for us to fully rest and recover.
One of the people quoted in our story, she was talking about her kids being country kids, wild kids, used to running around, doing things, and then, having to be in the city can be a very different environment for them.
Yeah, it's a real cultural shock from being on the road and seeing how much traffic there is and You'll get comments around how close the trucks are to the car. That spatial awareness is very different for country kids. And then when you're in a hospital, it's a very controlled environment. It's very clinical, it's very quiet. It's hard to keep wild kids that are used to having all that freedom in a bed, sitting in a chair all day. If their siblings having chemo, they could be sitting there for 6-8 hours. It's a long day, and it's a lot of pressure on the parent as well.
So, Claire, your path to Little Wings has been an interesting one. You studied clinical psychology and worked in charities focused on human trafficking and exploitation. What would you say has been the common thread to all of that for you?
So I've always worked in not-for-profit, and the common thread is absolutely children and families. Wherever I go, I've always worked with children. I think when we really support the family unit, when we support children in that meaningful way, we go on to produce well-rounded, effective humans and then stronger communities. So that's always been my space. Prior to Little Wings, I did work in an anti-human trafficking organisation, running the only safe house in Australia, and 3 in Cambodia, which saw me spend a lot of time in Cambodia. And the youngest little girl there was only 18 months old who had been trafficked. It's a very draining space to work in, and it's a very challenging space because you're always trying to hold back the ocean. It's so corrupt. The government aren't engaging. You're trying to do what you can, but you're almost a sitting duck waiting for the next raid to bring the next girls through. You can never get in front of it to have that proactive approach to it in countries like that, unfortunately. It's always reactive. So I did it for a few years. I feel like I had an impact on those children and those girls that came through while I was there. And I did a lot of debriefing and structural support with the staff. I thought that was important. It's a lot of weight for them to carry as well. But ultimately, I found myself at Little Wings. And for me, my mum was a nurse, so I spent a lot of time as a child in the hospital wards, waiting for her after work. And I also grew up regionally myself. So I was aware of those barriers. I felt them myself as a child. And so I really align with a lot of the experiences that the families coming through using our service experience.
Whereabouts did you grow up?
I grew up in Foster. People now will say to me, Foster's not regional, but when I lived there, it was a 6-hour drive and an ice cream container for the Bulladila Curves. So it was a traumatic experience going to and from. And our closest major hospital was Newcastle. So it was a 2.5-hour drive.
So Little Wings has 8 full-time staff, 90 volunteers, and last year travelled 250,000 kilometres by road and 500,000 kilometres by air to transport children to 5 partner hospitals and essential medical services in major cities. Can you give me an example of a patient explaining why they needed, you don't need to name anyone if you don't want to, but explaining why they needed Little Wings and how the organisation was able to make a difference to them and their family?
Yeah, of course. I have so many examples. Probably the one that always comes to mind is our longest flying passenger, which is a young girl named Armani. She lives out the back of Canamble, and the family, an incredible family, but one that have a lot of financial pressure. They run a farm. They're really in the day-to-day business. They're all hands on deck. When Armani was 5 years old, she was helping her brother with his evening chores, which included lighting a fire. And she accidentally sprayed the accelerant on her little body instead of the fire. She completely melted her ear off, part of her face, all of her torso, her arms, and of course the top of her legs where the skin was healthy is used for skin grafts. So Armani's been flying with us now for nearly 12 years. Every time she has a growth spurt, she has to come in for treatment where they will do skin grafts. She has a lot of surgery and then all the rehabilitation. So typically for her, we won't see her for sort of 6 to 7, 8 months, and then we'll see her every week for maybe 10, 12 weeks where she's coming back and forth for treatment. And unfortunately, in the past, before she was referred to Little Wings, the family did miss appointments because they didn't have the access to transport. They couldn't leave the farm. They didn't have any support for the other children. Armani's one of 6, and they seem to have 1 million sheep, running a big sheep farm out there. When it's just one person can come in and out with Armani, if it's a day trip in and out in the same day or if it's overnight, the disruption to the family is minimised. And even if you're a family that's not financially struggling, when you have to do it every week over long periods of time, the bills mount up, you can't work, and at some point it's going to have a real impact on the financial independence of a family. So we try to remove that pressure to keep families functioning and financially independent during those times as well. But for Amani, she continues to travel, and she'll have to travel with us until she's fully grown, which will be around 18, 19 years of age.
Wow. So where does Amani receive treatment?
She flies in and out of Westmead Children's Hospital. So they know her well there, and she rules the roost when she walks through the corridors. And, she wants to go on and be a nurse herself because she's experienced that, and she wants to give back to those environments. And it's so powerful to see a young girl with heavily scarred, she will live like that, but she has a real sense of purpose. In fact, Armani was in the hangar one day, and she was listening. Her grandmother, Tracy, was with us, and she was asking how Little Wings was funded. And every mission that's funded, we track that. So we're able to tell the family if they want to know who funded that mission. And we were able to tell them that it was a local courier company called Air Road that had funded it. And Armani could not believe that someone she had never met wanted to help her. Like, she just couldn't believe it. Anyway, a few months later, we got a deposit of $500 in our account, which is the reference Armani. And when I called her mum, she said, she went to the shearing shed where her dad was working at the time and collected all the spare little tufts around until she had a full bale of wool, and she wanted to fund a mission for another child.
How beautiful.
Yeah, and she then went on to collect cans until she had $1,500, which was the cost of the mission. And she inspired the whole Return and Earn program that we now run in 55 schools across New South Wales.
Wow. She's a story on her own, isn't she? That's for sure.
She's just an amazing girl, and just so down to earth and so honest about her experience. I can't imagine myself being in that position, and she just is like sunshine and just continues to move forward. And her resilience just exudes her. We talk about resilience, but until you've met young people like that, you really don't know what it looks like.
And her family must be so grateful to Little Wings.
Yeah, we have a really special relationship with them because part of the whole notion of Little Wings is that it's for that ongoing access to healthcare. And so what that means is we build these really powerful relationships with them, and we're able to really connect with them. And so we're there when it's not a great day, but we're also there for the triumphs and there to celebrate the wins along the way. And so, yeah, I think they're incredibly grateful, but so are we, because it's a privilege to be part of someone's journey and to be up close and personal when it's the most vulnerable times.
You talked about in your previous jobs doing that important debriefing with staff. Amani sounds like a success story. You wouldn't have just success stories that you're dealing with. That must be challenging.
Absolutely. In fact, actually, I'd never been to a child's funeral before I started at Little Wings. And unfortunately, we do get invited to them a few times a year. I would have to say that the outcomes for children's health is much greater than adults. So they're not a lot of bad outcomes, but the reality is there are a couple a year. And we have to be very careful to support our volunteers and our staff through that time, making sure we check in, making sure we rotate drivers and pilots so that they have that space to digest it, and also giving them the option to opt out if they want to, because it can be really heavy. You do become quite attached to these families. And I'd have to say the drivers in particular, because when we're in the car and it's quiet, we chat. We talk about our day. We talk about things that are on our mind. And it's just an organic thing that happens. And so drivers do tend to bear the brunt of those stories. And of course, when they're great stories, they're there to high five and they're very excited. But when they're bad stories, you need to make sure that we as a team are aware and we can check in with those drivers and make sure that they're doing okay.
Even so, I guess there'd be some consolation in knowing that you've made their journey that much more comfortable or that much better with what you're doing.
And I think that's how we balance it. We say we're doing the best that we can. We are making a difference in that process. Maybe they got a little bit more time with their family. Maybe they were more comfortable during that time because they could access the care they need. And just really making sure that, I suppose, we're part of that journey with the family, and we're also honest. If we're upset about it, just saying, you won't see Jeff, your driver, this week, so he's taking it a little bit hard, so that they know, because sometimes they do wonder where Jeff has gone. And I have a prime example of that. Jeff's one of our very beloved, longest-term drivers, and he was driving the same little girl who had a spinal surgery. She actually comes in from the Northern Territory because there's no children's hospital in the Northern Territory, so she has to come into Sydney. So she was very accustomed to seeing Jeff each mission, and he wasn't able to go. I went, and she said, "Where's Jeff?" I was like, Jeff's busy, but I'm here. And it becomes part of the ritual of what they're doing. It becomes part of that safety process where it almost takes not only the anxiety but the thought out of it and something to look forward to. And we find that a lot of children can actually reclaim their story and reclaim that narrative because they talk about my friend Jeff or my pilot Wayne or my plane. And when they go home, they're not just talking to their friends about, I was in hospital, this happened, I flew in with Little Wings, I've got my own pilot. And I suppose it's nice to be on that end of the storytelling as well, to give children something else to focus on during these times.
Yeah, it's pretty special. So you've mentioned the pilots. 26 commercially trained pilots operate Little Wings' 5-plane fleet. All are volunteers except for your head of operations. Can you tell me a bit about these incredible volunteers?
I am just absolutely in awe. 6 years into Little Wings myself, and I'm just in complete awe of these people that donate their time and talent to keep us going. It literally allows us to remain in the air and on the road. But I think more than that, it's the compassion for the families, it's the passion for the industry, and using that very unique skill to provide support. That real human connection is so real for these pilots and drivers. And I'm just in awe of them. Some pilots have been donating their time since the very beginning, so nearly 13 years. And they continue to show up, and they have to do everything at Little Wings. They have to move the planes and fuel them and do the safety check and, everything. Whereas when they're working at huge commercial airlines, that's all done for them. They jump in the cockpit and they're ready to go. Everything's automated. There's big teams to support them. That's not the case at Little Wings. And so it's so refreshing to see these heroic sort of figures that we see in uniform just be so humble and so caring and so committed. So, yeah, I'm so grateful, and it's never lost on me how generous it is.
And are they mainly retired pilots, or are you getting all types?
No, we try to have a diverse range just in case for some reason, if all the commercials are gone, we've got some that are retired, or if we've got a lot of instructors, if they're moving into the industries, we have that variety. So about half are currently working as commercial airline pilots. We have about 25% are retired and about 25% are instructors of some kind.
And what about your drivers? Who are they?
A lot of the drivers are retired. About 10% are female and the rest are male. And we see a lot of people from all different walks, but I find they all have some sort of connection to Little Wings in different ways, or, maybe they grew up in the bush, or we have one driver who his granddaughter never left hospital. She was born and she passed away in there. And he dedicates every mission he does to his granddaughter, Zoe. We have teachers who have worked with these kids and seen the other side when they have the healthcare, how they flourish in the school system and wanted to be part of that. We have people that were truck drivers and they love to drive, and so they've come and connected the two. Yeah, they're just incredible people, and they've all got their own story, and they deliver a quality service every time. Anytime anyone steps into Little Wings, they're treated like VIP.
So what are your plans for the future of the organisation? I mean, as much as your services would be in demand, I'm guessing you'd welcome more partnerships with more communities?
Always. So Little Wings has had a 400% increase in service demand in 4 years. So the demand is essentially not going away, unfortunately. Some people will ask me, well, why has that gone up so dramatically? It's not necessarily because there's more sick children, although we know on average there's about an 8% increase in childhood cancer across Australia annually. It's more that people know about us. And we want people to know about us. We don't want people to miss out or skip appointments just because of the barriers that exist. But in order to do that, we need more partnerships. We need people to champion our mission in all different ways. And that could be following and liking and sharing on social media. It could be, hosting flyers in their hospital, in their businesses. It could be collecting cans. It could be partnerships. It could be donations. It could be donating their time. So we need people from all different walks of life with all different capacities to help us make this service operate. And really that's part of the magic of Little Wings. We are run by the community for the community. And somehow that just makes it easier for people to receive that support. It's just really basic. It's humans helping humans. And I think we never should underestimate if you can give a lot, if you can give a little, whether that be time or money or an introduction or a skill, it all comes together to make it possible.
Your base is at Bankstown Airport?
Our base and headquarters is at Bankstown Airport. We've been there since day dot, so nearly 13 years, and they give us incredible support. But some of the features and facts about Bankstown Airport is the second busiest airport in Australia. because it doesn't have that curfew, and it has a lot of aeromedical services there that are operating 24/7 from there, including Little Wings. That's our hub. But we also have a base at Cessnock, and we also have a base in Archerfield in Queensland.
So are there opportunities to extend beyond New South Wales and Queensland?
So we currently support the Eastern Seaboard, but we do have children coming from all over the country. If they need to come into Sydney or Queensland for specialist care, we will facilitate that as well. But our primary focus at this point is ACT, New South Wales and Queensland.
Can't forget the ACT, sorry.
Yeah, well, the ACT is a funny one because it also doesn't have a children's hospital. And so children with cancer, burns, any major genetic disorder, they have to come into Sydney for treatment. So they have a children's ward within the hospital, but anything specialised needs to come into Sydney. And so we fly in and out of Canberra Airport very frequently.
Earlier this year, one of our journalists, Kate Newsome, had the great experience of travelling from Bankstown out to Warren, New South Wales, and back again. Thank you for that. Kate's story of that day is in the current issue 162 of Outback magazine. I'm sure you've seen it, Claire.
Yeah, of course. It's such a beautiful story and such beautiful imagery. And we're so grateful for that because usually when those sort of stories come out, yes, there might be fundraising and all those sort of things, but what we usually see is families that need us find out about us and they reach out to us. And that's the most powerful because the thought of someone skipping appointments or missing out or just struggling so desperately to access that care for that child when we could alleviate it so easily, that's a really powerful offering.
Now you can read all about it there and you can see the photos Kate took on the day. You've talked a lot about, wanting to make sure that anyone who needs the service knows about it and the importance of fundraising. So maybe there's someone listening to this podcast who would like to donate something or who would like to use your service. What's the best way for them to go about that?
The best way is to jump on our website, littlewings.org.au. Of course, you can make a donation direct through the website or contact us. Our details are on there and it's all fully tax deductible. Or if you're a family, you can also just give us a call and we'll walk you through the process and make sure it's as smooth and consistent as possible.
Thank you for talking to me today, Claire. It's been really comforting in some way to know that you're doing what you're doing because really you're just sort of levelling the playing field, I guess, aren't you, for some kids anyway in rural and regional Australia, and it really doesn't seem fair that they should have poorer health outcomes than any other child. That's a lot of kilometres that you're doing to ensure that occurs.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Terry. The inequities that continue to exist in our healthcare system for regional families is significant. And I think more than that, when we're accessing healthcare at an early age consistently, yes, we have better outcomes, but we're also changing health literacy for country families, which means we have more of a lean when it comes to early intervention, when it means to seeking the care, but also being medically compliant. So following whatever diet it is, whatever medication that's issued, attending the next appointment. And if we want to change that way of working and improve longevity for regional people, we need to have access and we need to make sure we have the education there to really make sure that we prioritise health.
Well, thanks for being on the podcast, Claire, and all the best for the future of Little Wings.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, Terry back again. I really hope you enjoyed that episode of the R.M.Williams Outback podcast. So we can continue to do what we do, please hit the plus button and subscribe to the free podcast so you'll know when new episodes drop. Oh, and please tell a friend who you think might like it. We'd also love to welcome you to the Outback magazine family, so grab a copy every second month at your local newsagents or contact us directly and we'll have the latest edition sent to you anywhere in Australia with free postage. As I said at the outset, it's all at outbackmag.com.au. Don't be a stranger, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening.